and promoting collaboration and equality in these industries. We are a group of passionate students united by a love for film as a powerful medium for social change, and we are determined to uplift voices and achieve equality. Thank you all for joining us in that mission today.
As Fusion's stature and reputation in the entertainment industry has grown, we are so thrilled and proud to have been made an allied partner of the Women in Film Sundance Women's Initiative. We have been supported by Tusk, Pro Funds, and the Canbar Institute of Film and Television. Throughout the entirety of the festival's life, we have been so passionately mentored and supported by our faculty advisor and NYU film professor, Susan Sandler. We would also like to thank our sponsors, the Will and Jada Smith Foundation, NBC, HBO, Canon, Final Draft, and CAA.
Thank you so much for joining us for this panel, which will be moderated by Karen Horne, the changemaker we just had the honor of celebrating upstairs at our brunch, and she'll introduce all these amazing. So after this event, we do have more panels in this same room, Women in New Media at 2 p.m., masterclass with the Queer Producers Collective at 4 p.m., and then our competition screening and awards ceremony at Cantor Film Center at 6:30. So we hope you'll stick around and join us for other events and enjoy the panel.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Rachel and Priya. Thank you so much. We can actually pass it all the way down because I'm going to start the questions on this end. So, but before I do, thank you all for coming, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panel. Starting from my left, right? You're right. I'm like, I can tell my left from my right. This is how that's going to go today. All right, so I have the pleasure of welcoming Yvette Miley, who is a veteran journalist. Yvette is a senior vice president for MSNBC and NBC News. She is responsible for talent management and development of people both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. Yvette is the executive in charge of weekend, overnights, and early morning programming, and also works closely with MSNBC President Phil Griffin and the editorial teams responsible for dayside programming, breaking news, and coverage of special events. Throughout her 26 years at NBC Universal, Yvette has taken on leadership roles that promote diversity, including acting as the executive in charge of NBC Out and working tirelessly to recruit and retain the best and brightest diverse talent to work in news. Thank you, Yvette, for joining us. Next, we have Amber Payne, who is a former colleague. It doesn't say that, but it probably does, but, and a good friend. Amber is executive producer at Teen, Vogue, and Them. She oversees cultivation and production of digital video series for both publications. She leads a team in both CN brands to strategize content, develop videos, and roll out blockbuster series. Before entering this role, Amber worked at NBC News for over 10 years. She started as a researcher, production associate at the NBC Nightly News and rose throughout the ranks to become an award-winning producer, working on breaking news and feature stories. In 2015, she became the founding manager editor of NBC Black, or NBC BLK, a section of NBC News with the mission to elevate the conversation around Black identity and social issues and culture. Amber is a graduate of the University of Virginia, where she studied art and media studies. Welcome, Amber. Audrey Esparza. She plays Tasha Zapata in the drama Blindspot that is currently in its third season on NBC. Audrey has appeared in a variety of television projects, including recurring roles on Power, Public Morals, and Black Box. Other TV credits include Blue Bloods, The Following, The Americans, Golden Boy, and Madam Secretary. She graduated from Tisch School of the Arts at NYU, spending all 4 years at the Experimental Theater Wing. Welcome back, Audrey. Foluke Tuakli. Did I do that right?
Kinda.
Kinda. High practice too. Foluke Tuakli.
Yeah?
Yeah. She's a page at NBC Universal who has worked with properties like The Today Show, NBC News Digital, and Telemundo. Before joining this prestigious program, she interned at Comcast Corporation, National Geographic Channel, and the White House Initiative for Educational Excellence for African Americans. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from the University of Maryland at College Park. Welcome. Radha Blake. She's a playwright, performer, and writer for TV and film. She's written for Baz Luhrmann's Netflix series The Get Down, Lee Daniels' Fox Network series Empire, and currently works as a producer-writer for Spike Lee's Netflix series She's Gotta Have It. She's co-writer of the film adaptation of Walter D. Meyer's best-selling young adult novel Monster, which recently premiered at the Sundance Film Festival's 2018 Dramatic Film Competition. I was in the audience. It was amazing. Please go see it when it is released. It's really amazing. When not writing for the stage or screen, Radha performs as MC Radha Muse Prime, whose brand of Ghostface Killer meets Mom's Mabley hip-hop comedy has sold out shows from New York to Norway. Welcome, my friend Radha. So, we are going to talk about breaking into the business. And if you were in the lunch, you heard me say there are no two ways of getting into the industry, or no exact way. Every way is different. My first job was as a receptionist at ABC here in New York. Can you guys tell us what your first break into the industry was? How'd you get it? Yvette?
I graduated from the University of Florida, and when I graduated from the University of Florida, I thought, wow, I have this great education, I'm going to automatically get a job. Well, it didn't happen. I got my first job because my sister convinced me to go into the local newspaper in West Palm Beach, Florida, and just give it a shot. So I went in, and they said, hey kid, you can answer the phone and take down statistics, write down the scores, and we'll put it on the clipboard page, they called it. And I was like, really? I can do more than just take dictation. I can actually write. I'm a good writer. And they're like, no, we're not interested in you writing. We just want you to answer the phone call, Suncoast 20, North Shore 10. That's all we need from you to do. But I would submit little stories about it. I would interview people on the phone, and I would write paragraphs. And then they said, oh, you can write. And then that was the way for me to sort of get an opportunity when the sports writer called out sick who was covering high school volleyball. They said, why don't you go cover high school volleyball, because we see that you can write. Even though we didn't want you to, go do it. And that's how I got my real first job in the industry. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, but sometimes you just have to do what you can until you get the opportunity you want.
So I went to University of Virginia. It was a very small major, media studies. There was no journalism program, news program. I wanted to be a graphic designer, maybe work in magazines or do page layout. But it happened to be a meeting where they would bring a majors meeting where they would bring back alumni, and the senior producer from NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw was there. I was asking him about graphics. I didn't know what a news producer did, what putting on a broadcast involved, and I really wasn't that interested. But I was asking him a lot of questions. I followed up with him, I stayed in touch with him, and I spent my summer interning in New York City with NBC Nightly News, where I learned what a producer was. I learned that it could be a job to tell other people's stories, to interview them, to present that to millions of people and inform them and educate them. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I knew that it was really going to be about timing and waiting for a job to be open. I mean, you guys are going to graduate and then be waiting for a job opening. It happened to be that I called kind of the right day, the right time. I followed up, I kept in touch with my mentors. I spent a winter vacation in New York City with my friends and called NBC and said, hey, I'm going to be in town. Could I just come by and say hi, and could I visit? You know, you guys are going to have to find ways to keep in touch with people that feels authentic and not annoying, and you have to know that everybody's busy, we're all busy, but it's just about knowing how to keep in touch. So the way I got my first job on Weekend Nightly News was I had another job interview in Connecticut at ESPN, called NBC, hey, I'm gonna be driving through town. They called me back 10 minutes later to say, oh, we have 2 job openings on Weekend Nightly News. You might as well interview for them. You might as well take the news test. I did that. I got called back the next day with a job offer. I started that Saturday basically in the clothes that I had interviewed in, starting to train for the job. And then I had to quickly go home and figure out how to, wrap up things and move myself to New York. So I think the lesson I learned from that was just about follow-up and timing, and you never know when something's going to be open. People might not think of you unless you have recently reached out to them to say, do you know of anything? I'm still looking.
I think my first a job for an actor, a real job, is complicated, because when you can actually get paid and can sustain a life, it's a very different thing. My first, real job was at Rattlestick Playwrights Theater. I did a show called Post No Bills, and it was directed by Michael Escamilla and written by Mando Alvarado. But the way I got that job actually started here. I don't know if they still do this at NYU, but I hope they did. I graduated in 2008, and for the first time, NYU put up a main stage play written and directed by a Latino. And that play changed my life. Among my cast members was Josh Segarra and Ismael Cruz Cordova, who are doing amazing things with their job, with their careers. But that play gave us all the opportunity to see ourselves in leading roles. And I think what that did for all of us was gave us the confidence to step out into the real world. So my first paying job was working at Rattlestick, but my first job that I stepped into, I wasn't paid, I was just given an opportunity, and that was here.
Hi everyone. My first job in the industry I got by sheer luck. I was a high school senior and I was about to go to college, and so I was applying for a crazy amount of scholarships to afford a life that I hoped would be better for me. And so in the midst of all the things I applied to the Emma Bowen Foundation, which is a program that, yes, snaps in the back, is a program for minorities who are interested in media. I was always passionate about television. I always stayed up watching TV, so I was like, I can write an essay about why I love television and why I want to be in the entertainment industry, but I wasn't quite sure. I was applying as a biology major at the time, because like any good Nigerian child, I started college as a biology major. Initially, I did not get accepted into the program. I filled it out the day it was due, and there was very explicit rules on it that said, do not handwrite any piece of this application. But I was using my public school library, and it wouldn't print out the first page, so I hand wrote it. And I happened to submit it. They were like, thank you for your interest. We'll get back to you. Never heard back from them. I had somebody that I babysat for, which was my first job outside of the industry. And they were like, hey, she happened to work at Scripps, which is a company that's one of the sponsors of the program, and said, did you get into the Emma Bowen Foundation? I go, haven't heard back, but if you need me this summer to babysit, let me know. And she goes, I really think you worked hard in high school. I was like SGA president, I was in musical theater, I was on track and field, my grades were good, I did all the advanced classes, I did everything I was supposed to do. So she's like, I feel like you're at the caliber that you should have been accepted. I'm going to follow up for you and see what happened. So I actually called her this morning too. Her name is Kimberly Halsey. She is my angel. She followed up on my application. They said we'd never read it because the first page of her application was handwritten. But because she called, they looked back at my application. They decided to admit me into the program, but all the placements had basically been made. So they said, we might be able to find something for you. There was one opening up at the time I was living in PG County, Maryland, which is on the other side of the Beltway. Okay, PG, I see you. And they had an opening in Baltimore. I said, cool, I can make it. I just said yes because I was so desperate to be in the program. But it turned out to be deep within Baltimore, so not near the Oriole Stadium or anything like that, deep. And at the time I didn't have a car. but I was so excited that I agreed to do it. And once I looked up the commute, it was about 3.5 hours by public transportation one way. And during rush hour the other way, it was about 5.5 hours. I took a train. I literally had my dad drop me off at a train to then get to Baltimore, then get on a bus to another bus that then went an hour and a half out. I survived. I'm still doing well, and Emma Bowen was one of the best programs I was ever a part of. I definitely struggled that summer. I spent a lot of time learning how to make the most of a long commute. I worked with my boss in case there was ever times when I didn't know when I was going to be showing up, but I wanted it so badly. And it was very crucial in me deciding to want to be in this industry. I'm no longer a biology major. I ended up studying marketing, and my first internship was in marketing the summer before I even started college. I worked in marketing and sales with Comcast Corporation. It wasn't as content-facing as I wanted it to be, but it was a start. And so I did what I had to do so that one day I would hopefully do what I wanted to do.
The question made my head hurt because I had to think back. I had to do math, and I don't usually do math. So, well, it kind of depends on which industry you're talking about, because I've worked in a couple of them. But I feel like I've had 2 tracks running simultaneously. One is a performer, playwright, and then one is a writer in TV and film. And I feel like what's happening now is they're coming together, but both are important in terms of like where I am as an artist today. And as a playwright performer, meaning someone who has the agency of telling their own story, I had done a solo show called Kenya about a basketball player, the only girl on an all-boys team, and I was about 22 when I did that. And so I did that, and simultaneously I had applied for a fellowship at Nickelodeon where I met. We won't say how long ago that was.
No.
But we both do moisturize.
Yes, we do.
We do and I got in the fellowship,
Yes, you did.
and within 6 months of the fellowship, I was writing for shows like Dora the Explorer and Little Bill and The Backyardigans, which was my job for a couple of years. People, y'all know those shows?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Okay. I mean, I was like a little star amongst the preschoolers, but most people. And the reason I say these 2 tracks were important is because as a person writing in children's programming, it was tough to crack into adult content, but my plays are what got me in.
Yeah.
And my first adult content TV writing job was on The Get Down, and that was because of my plays. It's funny because the industry has changed so much. I think when I first started, in fact, how I got into the Nickelodeon Writing Fellowship was by submitting a spec script for Little Bill. And that's what you did back then, is you submitted spec scripts based on other shows. And one other spec script I think I wrote was like Family Guy. But back then, people wanted to see how well you could handle, you know, the characters that existed in an established universe of storytelling. That's not the case anymore. And I think that that's why my plays, you know, as a playwright, I've got plenty of them. Those have been my writing samples for the last 4 or 5 years, even though I'm a TV writer. In this industry now, people want to hear your voice. They're not interested in you being able to write someone else's show. They just want to know what your idea and your scope and the tone of your voice is. And so my plays have really helped to break me into the industry.
That's great.
Yeah.
What is some of the best advice you guys have gotten from navigating your career, and what are some of the hardest lessons you've had to learn in your journeys of starting your careers? You can start, Radha, we'll just pass the mic on down. If anybody else wants to chime in, I'm happy to pass this over to you. So.
You may know her as a Koye. But I know her as Denai, and she's a good friend of mine, and she gave me some really great advice. I had been struggling in theater, knocking down many doors and wondering why, like, people I had already some established connections and relationships with were not, like, dancing in circles, trying to produce my work. And she said, go where the love is. And I've never forgotten that, meaning if there's someone who has an interest in you, they may not be, you know, on the level of the gatekeepers that you've been kind of idolizing and worshiping, but, you know, cultivate the relationships with people who know, love, and accept your voice as a storyteller, as opposed to, like, trying to knock on those doors, because you never know what that relationship is going to turn into. That person may end up becoming a development executive. And again, like, yes, your writing has to be on point and be at its best, but sometimes it's about the relationships that you have. I know everybody in Hollywood now, and I feel like I'm gonna need them at some point. I'm gonna need to call on those folks. And so I think the best advice is go where the love is. And what was the other question?
What is some of the hardest, like one of the hardest lessons you learned, that you've learned from?
One of the
Don't
hardest.
go where you're not loved.
Right. Well, no, I think the hardest lesson I've had to learn, God, there's so many of them. I think one of the hardest lessons is if you don't love yourself, how the hell you, what is it RuPaul says? How the hell you expect somebody else to, and I feel that way about your work. Like you have to, because, you know, before Atlanta, myself and a good portion of my friends have been pitching to Hollywood shows about creatives. And, you know, now everybody wants to do Atlanta, but they want to settle in Seattle or Chicago or whatever. But you really do have to be your biggest champion. You know, like, do not wait for someone to endorse your work. And I mean, if you've been in the business as long as I have, you'll go through this very interesting shift where the people who could not answer your call are now all clamoring to talk with you. Stay humble, sit down, stay humble. You know, don't then use the moment to do this big performance of, do you remember me? Oh, now you want to have a meeting with me. You know, let all of that go. I mean, at the industry, and Karen, I love you. But the industry can't help but be the industry. You are not. You are not. You are in it. You are not of it. Okay. The industry cannot help being the industry, and there are going to be times when people are not picking up the calls, and then there's going to be a time when they all are trying to get at you, and it's just this thing of like, that's just how it happens. Do not harbor or hold on to that, to any bitterness. It's not going to serve you. It's just not going to serve you.
Ooh, I get a lot of advice. I'm in a transitional place in my life, so I look to a lot of people to advise me, their counsel. Some really great advice that I've gotten a lot. Here's one piece was, in the presence of the unknown, choose the most elite experience. You're not always going, that was by a NBC News / MSNBC correspondent, Morgan Radford, check her out, she's really great. I oftentimes don't always know where I'm going, but there should be an idea that when you prepare yourself in a high level, at a gold standard, if you will, that when your preparation meets the right opportunity, you'll be ready and successful. So sometimes in the unknown, the elite experience is going to take you to the right places or expand your network. Another really great piece of advice I got recently, I think as a woman, especially a woman of color, I'm oftentimes very concerned with the way that people perceive me, especially as an ambitious, driven young lady who eventually hopes to be in a leadership position. I'm often inquiring about the ways that other people have dealt with that in their career. and an SVP at NBC that I was speaking to gave me a really good piece of advice. When you build strong relationships, you don't have to worry so much about perception. When you have people who can speak to your character and your work ethic, and you're consistent with that and you're following up, it's not always about how are people viewing me. And I guess that leads to my hardest lesson, which is, one, you really need to know yourself. You need to be able to sing your praises as much as you're aware of your weaknesses. You need to create a strong tribe who's going to lift you up, but they can't really do all the work for you. As a very community-oriented person, I'm really eager to lift up other people, and I'm also eager to look for mentors, but I had to learn that a lot of my success is going to be rooted in what I'm willing to do, what I'm willing to endure, where I'm willing to hustle, and what I'm doing with my free time. There are definitely people who are going to guide you, but don't take advantage of their kindness. And remember, at the end of the day, the only person who has control over your life is you.
I think some of the best advice I got really early on was really similar advice about like going where love is, but it had like a little bit of like a Latin. I remember I was working on a play with my friend Yvette, and Yvette's like a big sister to me, and I was just starting to audition for film and television, and I was like, Yvette, what the fuck? I was like, why am I not booking something? This is ridiculous. And she was like, no. Mm-hmm. She goes, you go in every time for your reputation. You don't go in for the job, you don't go in to get it, you go in for your reputation. And I was like, what does that really mean? And I thought about it, and it's like the most beautiful act of rebellion, of like being a real artist, is to try every time. Because we all know that it hurts more when you don't get it and you tried. But like, why not try every time, not for the job, but for yourself? Because after that advice, like, I can always leave the room respecting myself and say, like, I might have not have been the best one for the job. I might have not been the right one for the job. But I'm really proud of the work that I took the time to do. And, like, you're welcome. You know what I mean?
I think I had to learn to ask for things very early on. Early in your career, you're putting your head down, you're working hard. Oh, everybody sees me working so hard. Surely they're going to offer me that promotion, or they're going to just offer to give me a raise, and that's not going to happen. You have to be the one to raise your hand, to speak up, to say, I'm interested in covering the Olympics. I'm interested in going on this remote. You know, I'm interested in traveling with this correspondent. I know I've never done it before. Maybe keep that to yourself. But I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go. I've done the research, and I've been looking up locations and ideas. You know, so having not only just the guts to ask for things, but then really being ready to put your money where your mouth is and to back it up with your skills. So that was very key, I think, early on, when there's kind of a hustle of everybody at the same level who's really trying to climb. And then even on a practical level, just a hard lesson as a producer. Being a news producer is a very team-oriented endeavor. And there are many parts to the puzzle of getting a story on the air each day. And I had to learn that, you know, maybe if I was assigned one task, okay, I did my one task, but I'm part of this team. So I'm gonna read the script. I see a mistake, I'm gonna say something. Or if I have an idea on a better soundbite, I'm gonna say something. And it's kind of like bringing those extra qualities to the table. That I had to learn that, you know, I'm part of this team and I have to offer more than just maybe what I was assigned.
I guess my advice would probably echo a little bit of what has already been said, and I think for spending 26, 27 years in this industry, I see a lot of people come in and out of my office, and I see the ones who I think initially are going to succeed. And some of the things that I see in terms of that are people who are willing to sort of be truthful about where they are. Sometimes we think we are ready for the big job, the next assignment, and we haven't done our work. We haven't prepared ourselves. So I see sometimes people coming in not being prepared. So I think my best advice that I got was to be your own truth teller. Don't lie to yourself. If you know that you are not good at something, go work on it, get better at it. So you gotta be able to tell your own truth. And you gotta sort of know the truth when you hear it. Because sometimes there are gonna be people in your life saying, you're not quite ready. There could be people who are trying to block you and deny your dream, but there also could be people in your corner who are telling you, you're not ready, here's why, and here's how to get there. So when you hear the truth, you gotta know the truth, and then you gotta take action on that truth. And I think, you know, one of the things that really underscores the best advice also that I mention a lot is, and this happens more for women than men. Women, we think our hard work does speak for us. Your hard work does speak for you, but not nearly loud enough. You gotta learn to tell your own story. If you don't tell your own story, as Amber said, other people will get the promotion, other people will get the opportunity. So learn how to tell your own story.
There's a recent article that came out, right, about women who undersell themselves when they go in for job interviews, where for a job where a guy might not be 100% qualified, he'll go in there and go, I can do this job, but a woman would like undersell herself and say that I'm not.
I'll try.
I'll try
I took 8 courses, but
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of know what's going on.
With that, like being the best person, what are the best qualities that you feel to build your to build your career? That's one part of the question. And oftentimes, like for me, I would say for me, I always tell people to be the one. Like to be the one that people go to be the one who gets in early, to leave late. Like if you want to be indisposable, which no one really is in this industry, but if you want to be close to that, then you should be the one. You should be the one that people will rely on most of all. So that would be one of my for building your career is what I would say is a good advice for that. And in addition to that, I'm often asked about like how do you pivot from this place to that place, because I tell people when you get in, just get in no matter where it is, because this industry changes so much and you can go from one place to another. So the question is, what is the best advice to build your career, and how do you pivot from one place to another?
When you get in, do the job that you're in very well. I have so many people who come in and say, you know what, I'm a PA or production assistant, but I really want to be a nightly news anchor. But if you suck as a production assistant, guess what? You're probably not going to make it up through the pipeline. So be good at the job you're in order to get the opportunity you want. Alex Preston, who's a graduate of NYU, she started out as an intern for Morning Joe. And then she became a researcher on Morning Joe. But she really wants to write comedy. She doesn't really want to do news. So she left the job from intern on Morning Joe, got a job on Morning Joe, and then became one of our researchers on the news desk. Just last week, she got a job with Jimmy Fallon. So you start somewhere, do the job. If she wasn't doing her job where she was, she wouldn't get that opportunity to be with Jimmy Fallon. And she's a graduate of NYU. So she had to get in, get the job, do the job well, build her brand, protect her brand, work late, come in early, do what needed to be done, and now she has this opportunity working with Jimmy Fallon.
I think it's also about follow up and follow through. So someone sends you an email, acknowledging the email. I'm taking care of this. I'm updating you. It's kind of those little things that show people above you, okay, I can give this person another task. Okay, this person is listening to me, they're hearing me. I'm gonna give them more responsibility, because a lot of times you'll start out in a job. When I first started at NBC, I'm making tape dubs, I'm transcribing hours-long interviews that I know they're gonna use 10 seconds from, but it's kind of, you have to also think about how all those little tasks that you're learning at the ground level are also gonna come in to play later. I can listen to an hours-long interview and I can hear the soundbite that we need or know what to pull out of it, and that's by listening to and transcribing and working with producers to see how they selected what they, were ultimately putting in their piece. So that's.
I think I was told a long time ago that if you're the most experienced person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I'm always trying to get in a room with somebody who knows a little more than I do. Definitely do your best, bring your best work every time, but I'm never ashamed or afraid to ask a question, because I'm always happy to answer them myself, and everybody's been in your position at one point. So if you don't know, ask.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about questions. I often ask a lot of questions, and one of the most important questions I've asked, whether it's as a page or an intern, is how can I help? I think an important thing is taking initiative. We talked about that a lot on the panel already. So being able to say, hey, I see you're really busy. You got in really, really early and left really, really late. Even, can I get you a coffee? I'm about to run to Starbucks. Or seeing a business problem that's kind of gone on the wayside. Everyone is very, very busy. And as a page, you go into an assignment for 3 months. And I like to think of myself as a consultant. So what is the thing in that department that I can do to help elevate the brand? How can I bring my skill sets and be a value add without getting in people's way or without being annoying? I worked with NBC BLK, and they do a lot of writing. I can write, maybe not as well as Miss Miley. So I was like, you know what I'm really good at? Social media. Can I help you there? Or, I've really been working on my editing skills. I can help you edit some videos, and just always being willing to lend a helping hand. I think questions also lend to the next thing, which is curiosity. You should always be curious about the industry that you're in. I think that shows that you're passionate about it, one, but also that you're always working to develop a comprehensive knowledge about what it is going on. And
Look, I
then you can
have a question for you. Like, so the page program, you get to rotate. So when you started it, did you think you would want to do one thing? Like, how long have you been in the program?
I've been in a year.
A year. So you've been on how many rotations?
Three.
Three.
I did 3 rotations. I did 4 assignments.
So has your idea of what you thought you wanted to do, like, about the pivoting part of it, has that changed a little bit, like, since you've been at NBC?
Great question. I think the name of it has changed. I think a lot of figuring out what you want to do is giving power to your truth. As Ms. Miley talked about, I know what I'm good at, I know what I like, but I'm not always confident enough to say that. So in people giving me chances as a page, I've been able to explore those things. And it's also what I like to call the SIFT method, which is you do a lot of things, and it's really valuable to figure out what you don't like as much as it is to figure out what you do like. But you pull from the things that you don't like, the pieces that you're going to take with you into the next thing. So I even talked about I was a biology major. That may not seem relevant to anything I'm doing now, but I really liked the research aspect of that. I liked finding solutions. I also loved the concept of structure function, that everything is intentional and that every piece of the body works to catalyze whatever process or what have you. And so I didn't realize that that kind of aligned to the fact that I love storytelling. I love the fact that nothing happens by accident. I think I like proactive storytelling where I can find narratives that kind of propel a story forward or give somebody something to think about. And I'm kind of taking, maybe it's not scientific research or it's a scientific discovery, but what discoveries can we find out about people in the ways and magnificent ways in which we were created.
Great. Ms. Blake?
Just in terms of pivot and having to learn a new lesson and work in a different function, as a playwright, you are the voice in the room. Everything is about catering to your vision. As a TV writer, you are a part of a super brain, and I had to learn that. I had to learn how to be a team player, and that was a struggle for me because, not because I don't like people and I don't like collaborating, but when you're writing for television, the job isn't, in theater, you might work with a dramaturg, and their job is to ask you questions based on your intention for the play that you're writing. But they would never dare try to solve it for you, whatever the problem is. It's the opposite in TV writing. You don't go in a room and you don't say, I don't like this. This doesn't work. Your job is to solve a problem. And so I had to put on a different type of thinking cap around solving problems for a story that did not germinate within me, but that I was helping to build. So just this idea of putting aside how I would do things and how I tell story, or what kind of stories I particularly want to tell, and working in service of our story. Even though it says, written by Radha blank, if I'm working in TV, it really is something we've all come together. Like when you go off and write a script in TV, we've all beat out the beats.
Yep.
And, you know, there may be a really great scene that you weren't even thinking of, that one of your co-writers came up with. And it's your job then to bring it, you know, to light. But I think being a team player and working in service of an idea that was not mine was something I had to learn, but it's been very, very fulfilling and rewarding. I'm thinking back on a moment working on Empire, and TV writing is like Jenga. You know, if you pull out certain blocks, the entire thing falls apart, and we call it, you know, the episode getting blown up. And because episode 9 got blown up, my episode, which was I think the mid-season finale, was in shambles. And we had to deliver it to the studio and then to the set within days. And so myself, Carlito Rodriguez, Wendy Calhoun, and Ayanna Floyd were in a room from 9 a.m. to about 10 p.m. at night, just like working feverishly. And it was one of the most fulfilling and rewarding experiences I ever had as a writer, having these people, like, we took pee breaks, but we did not really leave that room. And it was very, very rewarding and fulfilling for me.
Can you write me into an episode?
I'm not on that show anymore.
Oh, man.
She's
Can I appear with you on
gotta have it
Blindspot?
now, Yvette, so you want to get written into She's Gotta Have
Sounds
It.
like
So.
Yeah, I am pivoting.
Trying to do a lot of career
I am,
pivoting.
yeah.
So we're
Changing.
experiencing a moment with increased representation of diverse women on screen, like and with movies, with Black Panther, A Wrinkle in Time, Superstore, and I had to put that in there because I work for NBC, Jane the Virgin, and landmark moments in news with Rachel Maddow and Hoda Kotb being the co-anchor on the Today Show. What do you guys think is the key to getting even more positive representations of diverse women on screen? Radha, we'll start with you.
We need more people like you in those positions, Karen. Because Karen is why I was at Nickelodeon when I was for the fellowship. And, you know, it's not about, oh, I see a person of color, I'm just going to hire them. But we know that it can be very easy to be overlooked. And a lot of times people, and there was a TV show, I won't say which show, that I was up for, and I really wanted this job. And the job ended up going to one of the showrunners' friends, who was a white male. And hey, you know, when I get my own show, I'm gonna hire my friends too. But because that happens so much, we need people like Karen in positions where they can hire and funnel in diverse talent to do so. And then at the same time, I think we just need to be honest. You know, I was talking to my friends about how the hashtag #MeToo has galvanized the community around, you know, mistreatment of people, around sexual harassment, but we don't have a hashtag around racism. That people, I mean, we have plenty of hashtags, but there isn't a hashtag that everyone has gotten behind. And I think it's because a lot of work and a lot of relationships, a lot of what happens in the industry is fear-based. You know, there's this fear of if you say something and you speak up, you could lose your job and you could pay for it. And there's a part of me that agrees with that because I've experienced that. But then there's the other side of me that says, like, you know, it took Tarana Burke and who was it? Alyssa Milano and Rose McGowan. You know, it took people to say, enough of this shit. Like, we're tired. And then when those people stood up, people stood by them, and people stood by them. So I do think that along with having people like Karen in positions of power, we have to also still completely continue to challenge the industry in terms of their hiring practices and not be afraid of it.
In terms of getting more diverse women of color in front of the screen, I would say we need to expand on what it means to be diverse. I think I love diversity and inclusion as much as the next person, if not more. But I don't like the word diversity anymore because it's so tainted and it leans so racial. I think if you look at the essence of diversity and inclusion, it's a lot of different things coming together in order to create a better product. So it's not always about race, and oftentimes we look at it so black and white, we often forget like Asian American, Native American, Latino, Latinx. We forget difference in ability. We forget socioeconomic diversity. We forget regional diversity. In entertainment, a lot of times we're looking at the East Coast and the West Coast, but what about those flyover states? They might surprise us.
Well, there was a show that just premiered that made everybody aware that those flyover states are still very much a part of the process.
Absolutely. And so I think we have to expand what it means, but it's also more than just having them there. It's how do you empower people to use their voices in an impactful way without fear of retaliation. It's definitely on a new frontier, and when you have more of it, then people are encouraged to tell less monolithic experiences. They can get into the nuances of who they are, because even in who we are as individuals, we're diverse in our experiences, and so I identify as a black woman, but I'm a very proud person from Maryland too. And so these are the different ways that we can relate to people. And so when we get to a position when you can look at a show and not just see the color of your skin and feel obligated to watch it, but it appeals to many different people from many different walks of life, then that's when I really think we'll be in a good place. How do you do it? I think one way to do it, especially in terms of socioeconomic diversity, is you can't really wait for somebody to give you permission to do it. To be a page is an awesome privilege. To be at NYU is an awesome privilege. But as much as it goes for hashtag, anyone can start one. As much as it goes for an Instagram page where you're funny, you can do it right now with your phone. Probably has really good quality on your phone. And it's the fear that might be keeping you back, but you can make the film right now. You can work with your friends, and even if nobody sees it, even if your friends say they support you but they're struggling to retweet you so they just hit you with a like, at least it's real. At least you're creating a portfolio of quality and you're showcasing your talent, so when you get to a Karen, you have something to show. Like, this has been me working over time. People may not have been able to recognize it yet, or might not have the resources to get the exposure that I deserve, but here's what I have to show for it. And sometimes engagement, even with 5 people in an impactful way, is much better than like 2 million subscribers that you bought, but you're only getting 5 likes. Am I speaking your language? Do you see what I'm saying?
I think I would say like really bring it, like really show up when you're given an opportunity. Because I think we all know that there are rooms of people that saying that we're here that because we checked off a box, right? Like, I think it is our responsibility to prove them wrong. I think it's our responsibility to really show up every time, because a win for one of us is a win for millions of little girls, you know? Is it fair? But we carry cultures on our back. That's just where we are right now. So if you are given the opportunity, don't fuck it up for everybody else.
Well said. I think you should drop the mic and just exit. Boom. See you later.
The women in the Obama administration had a strategy called amplification. So one person was in a room and they'd have an idea and they'd say the idea, and then other women in the room, hey, that's a great idea, Yvette. I love your idea about this. I think that's a good one. So acknowledging the creator of the idea, because often you're in a room and, you know, I found I'd say an idea, oh, does anyone have ideas? I have an idea about this. I knew a couple people heard it, I wasn't loud enough, but there's someone else that said that same idea, and then everybody was on board with it. Probably an older white man who said that idea, and then everybody was on board with it. And I'm in the corner like, oh, I was a little too quiet that time. I gotta do that. Next time I get it. So just kind of hearing your peers or hearing the women around you, hearing a good idea and amplifying it. That's something anybody can do, no matter who you are or where you are. And I think it's only then that those, getting those ideas elevated. That's how that happens. That's how it gets amplified, and that's how we get a chance to prove ourselves. And then it's really just, having diverse women at the top. Like, these women here beside me, they are able to hire and interview and elevate women. So, that's part of why, I was on a producer track, but I really wanted to kind of get onto another track where I'd be able to, be someone that people could look up to, having come up in the news business and not seeing too many faces. Thankfully, seeing more and more faces that look like myself. But it's really about having diverse people at the top and in these executive roles.
I would say that for my career, in many places where I started, I was the first female in a lot of the editorial meetings, first woman of color in a lot of the editorial meetings. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to be authentically me, because if I speak too loudly or too aggressive, or that's an angry black woman, or she's only pitching stories about her community. So for the first few years of my career, my professional career, I was trying to figure out who I was and how to make people feel comfortable around me and not feel threatened or not be as smart, so I wouldn't intimidate Bob or whoever it might be. Nothing against Bob. But it took a while, and I'm telling you this story because try to be authentically you. People are going to judge you no matter what. They're going to put a label on you no matter what. So be authentically you. And it took me some time to find that, because I didn't have a lot of examples to follow or to look after or to emulate. So be authentically you, whatever that is, whatever your diversity thing is, be that. But it is also true that when I walk through the room, I'm not only there for myself, I'm representing something. I'm representing people who look like me, because there is a judgment that lives not only on me, but the people who look like me. So you do need to represent. First represent yourself, and then represent who you are.
All right, I just got told I have 5 minutes left, and I have like a whole lot of questions I want to ask. All right, so we're gonna just have to go through this. I'm gonna stand up so I can get some of these out, and I have a bad name. All right, so you talked about authentic stuff, and it's one of my questions I had. I often talk about bringing your authentic self to work, even as that makes you really uncomfortable. I'm sorry.
You're 7 feet tall.
I know. I was like, so I often talk about bringing your authentic self to work as an executive, but also to my writers. So if we could pass that down to Radha, because I want to talk about quickly how you bring your authentic voice to your storytelling, because I talked about that in our lunch earlier, in our breakfast. You have to bring your authentic voice to your work, and that we get excited about that as development people, like when your story is authentically yours. So, and how much has your authentic voice played a role in She's Gotta Have It? Because I really want
My authentic voice played a role in only the good things. If you liked it, then it was me. Just joking. Well, a couple of things. I remember when I first started working on the Get Down, one of my friends, I usually wrap my head in a head wrap. One of my friends was like, please don't ever take that off. And I didn't when I walked into the room, and it surprised some of the guys there. But I think I'm also of a certain age. And so I don't know how to not be myself, but that was why I was hired. I remember when Spike and I were, when I was still kind of auditioning for the role, we were on the phone for like 40 minutes, and we were talking about a play of mine, and he was like, wait. So the social worker took the kid in the end, and then she ran away. He was really invested in this story I had told, and I was just like, what? It just kind of shocked me that he was so interested in something I had created. And that was part of why I was on the job. Also, I'm from Brooklyn, and we have a lot of similarities, and I think he wanted people in the room who could reflect a certain experience of Brooklyn. But, I know a lot of writers who are having a similar experience, and they're much younger, and so there's a lot of struggle there. But I cannot help being who I am. And so, you know, when people ask me, well, who's your audience? I don't ever just find who my audience is. My audience is whoever fucks with me. You know, like people who listen to Rodimus Prime. Where as a rapper, I'm very unapologetically sexual. I say all kinds of messed up shit, but it's my brand of black feminist work, you know? And so, I don't know how to not be myself. And I think that's what Spike wanted, especially in creating a character who's a young woman who she's questioning who she is. She's trying to figure that out, but she doesn't, she's excited to learn these things about herself. And she is not ashamed to be who she is. And so I think that's what he wanted in the people who were going to create her for this new millennium.
Audrey, you talked a little bit about, we did a panel before and you said that the reason why you do TV is so you can go back to theater and doing the stuff you like. But also bringing, you are a character on, you know, on Blindspot.
Yeah.
How do you bring Audrey to, you know, your Zapata role? How do
Do you know what? Like honestly, not that much of me is in her. If I'm really truly honest, I think
because
we're like
that's acting.
yeah. I mean, I'm very different from that character. But I show up to set. I get in the van on time. I put my clothes up. I say good morning to everybody, and I know my lines. So that's where I show up.
That's great. And then a question I wanted to ask you also, because we don't have a lot of time for this anymore, is like, what is, and we want to leave time for questions. So I want to ask you about social media, and I also want to ask Yvette and Amber about this a little bit. For social media, how has it changed the business of Audrey Esparza, the actor? Like, with social media, it's a different world.
I think I might not be the best person for this question.
Because you're not really on social media.
No,
I know.
Sorry.
That's okay. Let's try to tag you.
When I first booked Blindspot, I was on no social media, and I remember the social media girl was like, "How did you get this part? You're not on social media." And I was like, "Oh,
Because we have a social media girl.
But I've been on Instagram for a little over a year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I try my best, and I got on it honestly because I was like, I'm a character actor. It doesn't make sense that people know who I am and believe that I'm all these things. And my manager was like, hey, guess what? You're on 22 episodes of a show. Everybody thinks you're this girl. And I was like, oh, well, that's not helpful either, right? So I took the opportunity to try and be as creative as I could while being myself. And I don't know how much it's changed the business, but it has made me incredibly aware of how many people pay attention, especially young women. So I know now that I know now that they look at our social media accounts when we're going in for things. But I do think that if they want you, they want you. Like, wouldn't you rather be where you're wanted, guys? I'm never gonna book a job based on my social media. I don't think.
So Yvette and Amber, these are questions for you. Like, we live in a time of, like, we hear a lot about fake news, and there's always a struggle to stay ahead of the news, and I think oftentimes that leads to people reporting wrong news, or how do you both deal with, I mean, Amber, your role has probably changed a little bit at Teen Vogue, but how do you deal with the fake news and the clamoring of what's out there and to get in front of it now?
Well, I mean, with Teen Vogue, we are, it's digital first platform. I mean, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. We experienced something recently that put us at a little bit of a detriment because of the fake news situation, because of, you know, things like the Facebook algorithm and Facebook prioritizing posts from people over news outlets. So Teen Vogue, we did a very special edition kind of covering the gun control efforts and the March for Our Lives. We had Emma Gonzalez, probably the most famous protester and student from Parkland, who was ripping up a Target paper. And that got memed and photoshopped so carefully into her ripping up the Constitution. Well, that was a video that we created for Teen Vogue that was all about empowering and showing this diverse group of young women who are not standing for this anymore, and showed them very in an empowering light. And this was twisted, and that's what went viral. Instead of this really special gun control special cover issue that we had put together, like that's what got talked about. I mean, it allowed us to kind of come in to correct the narrative, but it's interesting to see things like that it's not in our favor. It's like the technology is literally not on our side, and that's a problem that needs to be, okay, Mark Zuckerberg, I can't wait to see what you have to say next week about this. That has to be addressed, so we're fighting a lot. So it's really about, we're trying to have the right narrative for young people. Like, young people are activists, they are engaged, they are not just coming to Teen Vogue for fashion stories. We know this, and so I feel like it puts more responsibility on us to just have accuracy, have information, and also just really be engaging with our audience. But that was like an interesting problem that presented itself a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'm an analog woman in a digital world, and I just thought social media was all about cat videos. Actually, from a news perspective, we know that a legacy broadcast organization is slower. It's a fixed infrastructure, in that the digital is faster and it moves very fast. So we know that a lot of what we are chasing sometimes will come first from social media, because people are out there with their phones and they're on the scene. Doesn't mean we go to air with it, but it does mean that we pay attention to it and then we try to confirm it. So social media is first and fast in a lot of ways, and it will be, and will continue to be. And I think for us, fake news has worked to our benefit to a degree, because the more people talk about fake news, the more our ratings go up. And our ratings have been phenomenal, because people want the truth. They're going to find the truth. When I grew up, you had to wait until 6:30 for the evening news to find out what you needed to know. Now you have it in the palm of your hand. How many of you own televisions? How many of you are subscribers to cable? How many of you, when your feet hit the floor, what is the first thing you reach for in terms of your information? Your phone?
Mm-hmm. Do you get your news from, how many of you get your news from Twitter?
Wow. Comcast is a cable company, so I hope you guys all go out right now and go subscribe to cable.
They can't get it here.
I know, they can't get it here. Gosh, really. But no, but see, the world is changing, and information, the key to information, content is always king. A lot of people have access and have the means to communicate something, but you're not going to spend your time following someone who's giving you misinformation. Eventually, you're going to find it out. Eventually, you're going to say they waste my time, or they post too much, or they post too much meaningless stuff. I'm going to stop following this person. So you're making buying decisions even in social media. For us, we launched Stay Tuned on Snapchat with Savannah Sellers and Gotti Schwartz and Lawrence Jackson, finding a new way to reach younger people, finding different ways. So we're going to continue to try to innovate and keep up with you guys, because you're not waiting on the 6:30 news anymore.
I'm going to open up to questions, if you guys have questions. All right, please stand and speak loud so the rest of everyone can hear you, and tell us who you're asking.
My name is Stephanie Tinsley, and I'm a sophomore here, and I want to be a TV writer. And I so connected with what you talked about in terms of an authentic voice, because I'm a very loud person. I'm Black and Latina. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I can't not be myself, and I write in my voice always. But I'm currently in a class about TV development and developing shows, and the professor really talks about, he's a former exec with different TV networks, and he really talks about trying to target specific demographics to jump on the bandwagon with getting viewership, and that's just never been the way that I write, trying to target a certain thing. So how do you combat working with networks that are trying to kind of force you to write in a certain voice that isn't true to yourself?
I don't take that job.
Yeah, and then I
I'm not going to do what I don't want to damn do. Again, I'm of a certain age. Rhymes with shorty.
So Radha is successful and she can do that. So I would say that what you should do is like look to where you feel like if you have an idea or a show or you're writing something, you're going to write in your voice, but you'll know where that voice goes. So if you like to write sci-fi, you're not going to submit it to NBC for a procedural show or something like that because it just doesn't fit that voice. So you stay true to who you write, what you do and what you write, but you also have to submit it to the right place. You don't expect to submit it to something that is very character driven and, you know, if that's not what your voice is. So there are plenty of platforms, there are plenty of shows out there. There's like something like I think 400 and some odd scripted shows on the air now, or airing in some way, shape, or form. You can find your voice. Don't try to change for it. Just try to find the right fit for it.
And and cultivate an audience. Create your own work. I mean, look at Issa Rae. Cultivate your own audience. It's out there now with YouTube. YouTube are commissioning people to create shows, you know, for that platform. You know, and I've seen some crazy shit on there.
It's called YouTube Red.
Right, YouTube Red.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, well how much time do we have left?
Oh.
Okay, sure, because I have more, and then I want to show a little short film, that little something I brought. So.
I think, Amber, you were talking about when you graduated, you were calling back. No, you worked for NBC, and then you were away and calling back to people who you used to work with just to see who had time to meet with you. One, how do you gauge how frequently to follow up, and like what are the best practices for following up?
Sure. I think finding something to share or comment on. You know, hey Yvette, I saw the coverage of Memphis. That was really amazing. Really great that you had so many people on the ground. I just wanted to follow up. I'm actually still looking for jobs. Don't know if you've heard anything. I want to do this. You know, so kind of having like a purpose in. Come up with a purpose, come up with, you know, what have they been doing lately, show that you've been following them or following something they've been working on, or sharing some industry article. Hey, Yvette, I read this in Variety that, you know, NBC's going this new direction, more scripted shows. Thought that was so interesting and I thought of you. You know, I just wanted to say hello. Maybe do you have time for lunch this week? So I think it's also specifics. You know, when someone says, can we meet up sometime? Like, yeah, I mean, sure, sometime, yeah, definitely. But if it's, you know, it's better, and I have to say, you know, and Foluke has been good about following up with me, and she was an amazing page, and I owe Foluke a lunch date or an afternoon coffee break. So, you know, it's about kind of, we're working our way up to drinks after dinner, although I won't really be drinking what you'll be drinking. So it's, you know, coming up with specifics like, hey, I'm free this week, or, you know, if you hear back, like really getting specific, would you be free for coffee in the afternoon this week, you know, then you can really get someone to commit to the schedule. And you have to really just feel it out. Like, it's definitely never personal if I don't respond to someone the first time or the second time. It is, we're all victim to like the email inbox filling up. So I really don't mind hearing, you know, hey, just checking in again. Wrote you last week. I know that things are so busy for you. I saw you guys did all that coverage on the gun control issue. Really cool. Like, I'd love to ask you some questions about it, or having one question. You know, people don't really have time to write back a whole answer a lot of times, and I really prefer to meet with people in person instead of set up a call or be on the phone with them. And when I do that, I'm able to like, okay, I've blocked out this time, like we are sitting and talking across from each other. It's also helpful if, you know, if you're able to kind of come to that person or meet them where it's convenient. You know, you have to kind of read like what that person's day and schedule is like, but that's what I would suggest.
I have a final question for you guys, briefly. What is your best advice? What I got from the brunch this morning is total fear, I think, and from people who are, maybe not total fear, but like an understandable fear for these people, these students who are getting ready to graduate. about starting their career. So what would you say would be your best college graduate advice here?
Wow, okay. And I would like to, I'm gonna share this advice with all of you, but I also am going to shout out my niece, Kirsten Webb, who's a senior here at NYU. So she graduates in May. So I think, one thing, let your heart be your compass. But remember that your first step is not your last step. So get in the door somewhere, right? And start building your career that way, one step at a time. You always want to see what the end of the journey is. You always want to know what that final destination point is. But if you're so focused and like, I want to be an actor on Blindspot. And if you don't do the little steps to get there, you can screw up that journey. So really get that first job. Follow your heart if you can, right? You're gonna have to pay the bills at some point, so you may have to take a job that's not the one that you want to be your career. But get in the door, follow your heart, and don't be afraid. Everyone else these are all your competitors for that job. Get in the door, be a star, and do your job well. The one you're in, that'll lead to the one you want.
Find an advocate or a mentor, or that one person that you can go to and talk to, or that one person you can go to and say, do you need help with this? I can help you with this, or I'm offering my time to do this for you. I mean, I think I had people who I was fortunate to maybe get paired with a mentor or to kind of latch on to somebody who could help me throughout my career. And it definitely gets harder as you kind of continue to get older to kind of find that person. Now I'm at a new company and I thankfully have, kind of one person that I can kind of go to for a pulse check. So you have to kind of read the situation and the politics of the landscape. But I would say you have to find that person who trusts you or maybe is gonna go to you because they know your work and you start to establish like a good relationship. I mean, at an internship, there were so many different producers and thankfully I worked closely with just a couple and that was enough. I worked closely with those two instead of all 20 and I was able to get good guidance from them. I was able to get good mentorship from them. So it's not really about spreading yourself out and it's not about being, sucking up to the top executives. You have to remember.
Although that helps.
I quite like it.
Okay, it's not only about that, Have a good relationship with the top executives, but it's really, I saw some people sabotage themselves early, really a couple years out of the gate. They just distanced themselves from the group of PAs. They were all about pleasing, the top executives. And after a while, that system will carry some people.
Well, because those PAs are going to be top executives, and remember that.
Right.
So you never ever do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say if you don't have one now, find your artistic community. In between the jobs to pay the bills and the shitty auditions and this, I had a group of friends that we wrote and we worked and we tried things and we did things well and we did things terribly. But to come back and to remember that that's why we're here, that's why we're doing all these difficult things, to have a creative and artistic community I think is really important.
I would say don't compare yourself or your journey to other people's journey. I find a lot of insight by speaking to people who are older than me, and oftentimes the people I revere as the most successful, their path was never tangential. They went through a lot of different things to find themselves. And so just really be focused on where you're headed. I also think there's something to emphasize about focusing in on your intrinsic motivators. I heard either a quote the other day or it was on Instagram, was if everybody has your dream, then it's not really your dream, it's culture. So really focus on what you're trying to do, where you're going, and also try just getting out of your head a little bit. You all are probably very high achievers. When I was in the midst of college and I was really, really focused and I just felt like everything was coming in on me, I studied abroad. I went away because I felt like getting out of the context of how everybody else knew me would helped me understand my most authentic self. And we talked about authenticity and we talked about where you're going, but if you don't know who you are, how do you know what you're headed towards? And how do you know when you get there that it's going to be a joyous occasion? Because then you'll always just be wondering, what else is there? When will be my time to be happy? So you have to be happy with yourself.
Do the work. Do the work. You know, the chances of you getting staffed on a TV writing gig that absolutely speaks to you from top to bottom is not very likely. But while you're in the room, make sure that your pilot, not pilot, pilots, don't write one pilot. Please don't. Because everybody has that pilot that they feel like, oh, it's gonna be a TV show. No, write 5 of them. Trust me on this one. Because if you put your everything into that pilot and then it makes the rounds in the studios and you ain't got nothing else, you're gonna be devastated. So do the work. And, you know, I used to have a little chip on my shoulder about writing for Empire. And it was because I felt like as a playwright, you know, with a capital P, you know, writing about social justice issues, you know, and then writing about whether or not, you know, Lucia's gonna have a 3-way. I mean, I had to really humble myself. I mean, I've had friends, like really serious friends who I'd be involved with like really serious activist stuff, and they're like, Empire, Radha? Really? And even most recently, you know, Lena Waite is a good friend of mine, and she's on the cover of Vanity Fair. And, you know, there was a mention of us being on a panel together at Sundance, and then they said, it said Radha Blank, Empire. And I was like, oh shit, that's never going away. But that's why I was mentioned, is because the show was a hit and people loved the show, and so I stand by it. Those credits are why I'm able to pitch in rooms now, you know. But I say do the work while you're on a show that maybe you're not that crazy about, you know. Do the work in the room, be present, and then have your shit ready. Because also when you're a first-time writer, the first and second year, you likely can't pitch anything. So in that meantime, while you're getting, you know, while your time is passing in the room, get your arsenal ready. Don't just polish one golden egg. Have 10 of them.
Thanks.
Do the work.
So if we can quickly, I know in this room is full of future writers, actors, directors, and executives, and so with that, can we just show the film, our film festival that NBC Universal does, and that kind of speaks to all of what you guys are doing. My shameless plug. I'm really proud of that among the many other things we do at NBC. And, you know, I want to thank all of the panelists here today for taking time out of their Saturday. It is Saturday, right? I just and thank you guys for coming and listening to us, and thank you, Susan, very much for having us here. I wish you guys all the luck, because it takes luck. I wish you the perseverance, because it takes that as well. And I wish you the strong shoulders to carry this on, because you will all carry it on, and tell your stories, because we want to hear them. So thank you so much for coming out today, and go out and make great content. Thank you.